Hello, fellow humans. Take a deep breath, settle in, and get ready to meet your ancestors. Whether you're winding down for the night, driving under the stars, or quietly working, welcome to Sleepless Homo, where we tell the story of us softly. Archaeology, evolution, and science, spoken with calm curiosity, not noise or ego. This isn't about wild theories or sensational horror. It's about gentle science, humble researchers, ancient bones, and the quiet awe of what we've truly learned so far. If you find peace in this kind of slow storytelling, consider liking and subscribing. It helps other restless minds discover this quiet corner of deep time. And if you drift off, that's okay. The timestamps will be waiting when you return. As always, stay curious, stay calm. The light that made the dark. Picture this. You're sitting at the edge of a clearing somewhere in Africa, almost 1,000,000 years ago. The air is cooler now. Daylight belongs to the apes and the antelope, but when the sun sinks, the world reverts to its ancient ruler, darkness. For nearly all life on Earth, night was simply the long pause between hunts. But tonight, something new flickers to life in the dust. A branch struck by lightning, still glowing after the storm fades. And for the first time, a creature doesn't run. It sits, watching the flame twist and breathe. What happens next will change not only the night, but the mind itself. When early humans first encountered fire, it wasn't an invention. It was an observation. Lightning, lava, and wildfires had painted the landscape with flame long before anyone dared to tame it. But deep inside Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, archaeologists have uncovered something remarkable. Ashes, burned bone, and microscopic traces of heat from nearly 1,000,000 years ago. Far from where wildfires could ever reach, this evidence suggests something revolutionary. Fire had stopped being a disaster and had become a companion. What those first humans saw in that glow, we can't know. But the clues are undeniable. Charred plant fragments show low-temperature burns, the kind made by smouldering hearths tended by hand. Bones blackened by flame tell us fire was used for cooking, maybe even deliberately. Yet beyond warmth and food, something deeper changed. Fire split the world in two, a circle of light and an endless dark beyond it. Before this, darkness wasn't the opposite of anything. It was simply the state of the world after sunset. But when our ancestors began to nurture flames, they unknowingly created the very concept of night as a place you could step out of. Inside that fragile ring of firelight, colors bloomed, shadows danced, eyes glimmered back from faces. Beyond it, predators waited, unseen. Fear became something new, not a sudden jolt of terror, but an awareness of what might be hiding just beyond the edge of sight. At 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿𝐄𝐒, a site along the Jordan River dating to nearly 800,000 years ago, archaeologists found layers of burnt flint, charred seeds, and plant ash, signs that fire was being used and reused for generations. Those blackened olives, oak, and fruit pits tell us early humans were already experimenting, learning which woods burned fast and bright, and which burned slow and smoky. They likely gathered by these flames not just for cooking, but for safety. Though, of course, fire drew eyes from the dark, hyenas, leopards, lions, watching from the edges as humans watched them back. Both sides were learning what the other looked like in light. Fire didn't just change what humans did, it changed what they were. Smoke clung to skin, masking scent. Eyes adjusted to shifting glow and shadow. And in that warm circle, something else evolved. Conversation. The soft hum of voices replaced the silence of fear. Then came sleep, deeper, safer, longer. Fire stretched the day, allowing more time for thought, planning and dreaming. To sit by firelight is to create a boundary between the known and the unknown. Beyond it lies the invisible, the place where imagination first stirred. Anthropologists believe this separation of light from dark may have birthed our first abstract thoughts: warm versus cold, safe versus unsafe, seen versus unseen. There were no myths yet, no gods, no language, no superstition, just a creature learning that it could hold back the void with fuel and patience. The ashes of Wonderwerk and the charred wood of 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿𝐄𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐌𝐏𝐒 tell the same quiet truth. Fire didn't spread instantly. It flickered in and out of human memory. Some groups mastered it, others forgot it for millennia. Fire demanded care. It would die without constant feeding. That fragile dependency created something entirely new: cooperation. Keeping embers alive through the night meant passing the duty from one set of hands to another. For the first time, survival depended on continuity, on trust. Picture those soot-stained hands cupping the last glowing coal at dawn. In that small gesture lived one of the earliest traces of shared responsibility. Keeping fire alive wasn't about domination, it was about companionship with a force that could both protect and destroy. And within that balance, fear found its meaning, not as blind panic, but as anticipation. The fear of losing light, the fear of what comes when the glow fades. Modern neuroscience tells us fear and imagination share the same neural pathways. Both are born from the ability to predict. That might be the true legacy of those long nights of firekeeping. A brain that learned to imagine not for play, but for survival. Every flicker cast unpredictable shadows. Every gust tested vigilance. The brain learned to simulate, to prepare. From that, imagination emerged. Archaeologists studying ancient hearths often notice something consistent: organization. Charred bones near the center, unburned remains around the edges. This suggests early humans already understood space: where to sit, where to cook, where to rest. Each hearth was a tiny universe, a light gradient that defined safety and danger, community and wilderness. Inside that circle, cooperation took shape. Outside it, the dark pressed in. And within that contrast, comfort and fear, human consciousness began to glow. To this day, the human brain still dances to the rhythm of light and dark, releasing cortisol and melatonin in cycles shaped by ancient nights of vigilance. Even now, our fear of darkness feels strangely detached from reason. We know the walls of our rooms, we trust the locks on our doors, and yet the unease remains. That tension between the small circle of light and the vast unknown beyond it is one of the oldest emotional inheritances we carry. Every time we strike a match, flip on a lamp, or scroll through a glowing screen at midnight, we're echoing that first act of defiance, drawing a boundary against infinity. The archaeological record can't tell us what those first fireside conversations were about, or even if they were conversations at all. But the ashes at Wonderwerk Cave and the burnt flints of 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐄𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐌𝐏𝐒 whisper the same message. Once fire entered our nights, we never let it go. Every sunrise after that was the aftermath of a small triumph. Fire offered warmth, safety, food, and an enemy we couldn't live without. It forced us to look both outward and inward. If fear of the dark began with fire, then fear itself was never a weakness. It was a side effect of awareness. Recognizing darkness as something separate was also realizing our own fragility within it. Fire didn't simply chase away the night, it showed us how easily light could fail. And that moment, that razor-thin line between safety and emptiness, may have been the first spark of consciousness we would later call awe. When the flames died and only the embers glowed, the world returned to its ancient rhythm. Predators resumed their silent roots. The wind erased the smoke, and our ancestors huddled closer together, waiting for the first streak of dawn. They didn't yet know that in mastering fire they had invented contrast, memory, and perhaps even the first glimmer of fear. All they knew was that when the light disappeared, the world changed its face. When the night had eyes, the sun slips below the horizon somewhere in Africa about 700,000 years ago. The heat of the day vanishes quickly, and the shadows merge into a single vast blackness. You're not the only one who feels it. Across the plains, lions rise from their rest. Hyenas lift their heads from the dust. The world of sound begins to replace the world of sight. The night, in a very real sense, has eyes again. For most of Earth's history, darkness wasn't empty. It was crowded. Our ancestors, still closer to prey than predator, lived in ecosystems ruled by others after sunset. Fossil sites across Africa and Eurasia tell of landscapes swarming with large carnivores, saber-toothed cats like 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿𝐿 and 𝐓𝐿𝐼𝐌𝐿𝐿, hyenas larger than any alive today, and lions with massive jaws built for power. These weren't occasional threats. They were the architects of early human behavior. Survival demanded anticipation, cooperation, and constant watchfulness. Every choice, where to sleep, when to drink, how to move, was a negotiation with eyes hidden in the dark. Fossils from this era tell the same story. Bodies built for endurance, not escape. Species like Homo heidelbergensis and late Homo erectus were strong but slow, runners of distance, not sprinters. Their senses were tuned for daylight pursuit, not for ambush. At night, those advantages disappeared. Bones from open-air sites often bear the marks of both stone tools and carnivore teeth, sometimes on the same surface. It's evidence of competition, humans and predators fighting over the same carcasses. Sometimes our ancestors arrived first. Often they arrived last. Scavenging a lion's leftovers or stealing from hyenas was both opportunity and danger, reinforcing the deep link between night, fear, and the scent of blood. Around this time, Africa's grasslands were shifting. Long dry seasons were followed by bursts of rain. Herds of grazing animals grew, and with them, predators multiplied. Nocturnal activity surged. To survive, humans began using the narrow window of twilight, the brief hours when there was still enough light to see, but the hunters of darkness were already awake. Paleoecologists studying the chemical traces in the teeth of ancient lions and hyenas have found they specialized in nighttime or crepuscular hunting, just when human visibility vanished. The evolutionary pressure wasn't only to hide, but to know that something was watching. In that constant tension, early humans developed habits that still echo in us today. Sleeping close together, resting against stone walls or cliffs, posting quiet sentinels. The same behaviors are seen in baboons and vervet monkeys, primates who shared the same predators and learned the same lessons. Evidence from ancient rock shelters supports this idea. The advantage of sleeping with a wall at your back wasn't architectural, it was emotional. Limiting the directions danger could approach from meant limiting fear itself. As humans spread north into Europe and Western Asia, the cast of predators changed, but the pattern stayed the same. Lions, leopards, bears, and dire wolves all hunted the same corridors. Excavations at Boxgrove in England, dating to nearly 500,000 years ago, show piles of animal bones butchered by humans and later gnawed by carnivores. The story is simple and brutal. Sometimes the hunters became the hunted. Predator-prey modeling in paleoanthropology often reveals a paradox. The better humans became at scavenging, the more they risked running into dominant predators. Surviving required reading the landscape with precision, listening for calls, memorizing routines, learning the meanings of growls and silence. That demanded not just memory, but collective vigilance. One person couldn't stay alert alone. Safety existed only when everyone shared the same tension. That synchronized awareness may have been the seed of empathy, the moment when one nervous glance could trigger everyone's alarm. Fear became contagious, and for once that was a good thing. The night of the Pleistocene wasn't still, it was layered. Elephants moved quietly through the tall grass. Insects filled the air with their endless drone. Somewhere a lion's low rumble rolled across the savannah. For early humans, hearing replaced sight. The ability to detect the faintest sound meant survival. Even today, our brains exaggerate noises in the dark, assigning meaning to every rustle. It isn't paranoia, it's evolution echoing through our nerves. Modern physiology shows that the human body still reacts more strongly to sudden sounds or moving shadows at night. Heart rate spikes, pupils widen. The fear is automatic. That reflex likely descends from ancestors for whom a missed shadow meant death. But an overreaction cost nothing. Evolution favored those who feared too much rather than too little. Some of the most chilling evidence comes from predator dens where hominin remains lie mixed with bones of other prey. In South African caves, leopards appear to have dragged young humans into their lairs. Puncture marks on skulls tell the story clearly. The balance of power was still against us. To the eyes in the dark, we weren't thinkers or storytellers. We were meat. And yet, slowly, something shifted. Human groups grew larger. Their home ranges stretched farther. Mobility became its own kind of defense. By refusing to stay in one place too long, they became unpredictable. Archaeological layers show temporary camps, scattered tools, and short-lived hearths. A species learning to stay one step ahead of what hunted it. Movement itself became a survival strategy, trading permanence for safety. Some scientists even believe this constant tension shaped the way we perceive beauty and light. Human eyes are unusually sensitive to the red and orange tones of dawn and dusk, the colors of warning and transition. Those hues cut through dust, smoke, and haze, signaling the shift between danger and rest. Perhaps our love of sunsets and campfires began as a simple comfort, the reassurance that the hunting hour was ending or about to begin. As humans pushed into colder northern lands, new predators emerged. Cave lions, bears, and scimitar-toothed cats, rulers of long nights and frozen ground. Fossils from sites like Schöningen in Germany show wooden spears used for hunting horses 400,000 years ago. Proof of courage and cooperation. But even these hunters returned to shelter after dark. Tools extended reach, but not yet courage. Across continents, the pattern repeated. Africa, Europe, Asia, all shared the same rule. Day was for movement, night for stillness. Fear wasn't weakness, it was structure. It kept species in balance. And, in an unexpected way, those predators became teachers. They forced our ancestors to discover community, to plan ahead, and to face the fragile truth of mortality. When we picture the ancient world in our minds, it's easy to romanticize the bravery of early humans, but maybe bravery isn't quite the right word. Their survival wasn't about heroism, it was about awareness. They learned to use fear as a tool. Fear sharpened their senses, bonded their groups, and shaped their memories. Those who ignored it didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. Those who listened to it did. By around 400,000 years ago, the balance of power had started to shift. Humans were no longer just the hunted. They had learned to work in groups, to brave colder climates, and to tip the scales slowly, from prey to predator. Yet the instincts of those dark nights never really faded. That eerie feeling that something unseen is watching you from the dark, that isn't superstition. It's memory. It's the echo of an age when the night really did have eyes. Imagine lying in the tall grass, rain in the air, blood on the wind, listening for footsteps you pray never come. When your heart pounds at a sudden noise in the dark, you're not being irrational, you're remembering. Deep in your nervous system, the old signals still whisper. The watchers are never fully gone, shadows that learned to think. The night is silent now, but it isn't empty. You're half asleep under a cliff somewhere in Africa, about 400,000 years ago. The air cools, insects fall quiet, and inside your skull something new begins to stir. Shapes, sounds, movement. Not from outside, but from within. The predators haven't vanished. They've just moved into your head. For the first time, darkness follows you, even when your eyes are closed. The fossil record doesn't preserve thoughts, but it preserves skulls. And inside those rounded vaults, a quiet revolution was taking place. Around this time, the hominin brain began expanding, especially in the prefrontal cortex, the folded terrain behind the forehead. This region controls working memory, decision-making, imagination. In species like Homo heidelbergensis and early Homo sapiens, the frontal lobes became larger and more asymmetric, evidence that one hemisphere was specializing in complex sequencing and planning. That neurological shift gave rise to something remarkable, the ability to imagine events before they happened. Sleep, once a time for rest, became a time for rehearsal. Modern research on REM sleep shows that dreams often mimic real threats, chases, falls, confrontations. These aren't random, they're simulations, mental drills for survival. It's possible that this adaptation began when fear turned inward, when our ancestors started dreaming of what they most feared. Anthropologists can't recover dreams, but they can uncover the conditions that made dreaming possible. By 400,000 years ago, early humans were sleeping longer and deeper than other primates. Studies of primate sleep show that humans pack fewer hours of total rest, but spend far more time in REM. That points to an evolutionary trade, less time vulnerable to predators, but more time spent strengthening the mind. We gave up a bit of safety for complexity. When the world went dark, the mind stayed awake. The link between darkness and imagination may have started as a kind of defense mechanism. The same brain circuits that trigger fear also create mental images. The amygdala, the deep emotional core of the brain, fires both anxiety and vivid visualizations. When the outside threat fades, those circuits don't switch off. They repurpose themselves. They turn danger into daydreams. What began as a rustle in the grass became, over time, a shadow behind the eyelids. At sites like Bodo in Ethiopia and Kabwe in Zambia, skulls from this era show brain sizes nearing the modern human range, around 1,200 cubic centimeters. A bigger brain meant more neurons, but also longer childhoods. It took more time to grow and mature, which demanded deeper parental care. The social brain evolved alongside the dreaming brain. For the first time, humans could think beyond the moment. Working memory allowed them to hold multiple ideas at once, where the water was, where predators hunted, where the group had last rested, and during sleep, those fragments could rearrange themselves in surprising ways. Modern neuroscience calls it offline consolidation, the process that allows creativity and emotional regulation. In deep time, it was the first step toward imagination. Life back then was unpredictable. Droughts, shifting herds, new predators. The ability to simulate possibilities while asleep could mean the difference between life and death. A mind that could picture where the next watering hole might be, or sense when the rains would fail, had a survival edge. Fear became foresight. The darkness became a stage for practice, not just paralysis. As brains rewired themselves, The boundary between outer and inner worlds began to blur. Even without firelight, humans started carrying their own light within, the flicker of thought, the spark of imagination. But with that gift came a cost. Anxiety is imagination turned against itself, and it may be as ancient as curiosity. Somewhere between 400,000 and 300,000 years ago, our ancestors began to experience not just fear, but worry. Animals like lions dream of movement, twitching paws, flicking tails. Their dreams replay the hunt, but primates, and especially humans, dream in symbols. That shift from physical rehearsal to abstract story mirrors the growth of the prefrontal cortex. As the human brain expanded, dreams became more layered, more narrative. They began to resemble stories, not art yet, but the earliest flicker of storytelling born from self-awareness. Fossil data also show changes in the parietal regions, which combine input from sight, sound, and touch. This allowed early humans to build whole scenes inside their minds. Darkness wasn't just absence anymore. It became space, a canvas for memory and imagination. Picture a group of early humans lying close together at night, half asleep. The dangers of the day replaying behind closed eyes, a fall remembered, an escape relived. Some might murmur or move in their sleep, their dreams visible to others. That could have been the first moment of empathy, the first time one human glimpsed another's inner world. Modern neuroscience shows that dreams bind emotion to memory, softening fear while preserving its lesson. REM sleep lets the amygdala and hippocampus process trauma safely. Maybe that's why our ancestors could survive endless danger and still wake up calm, alert, and ready. The night trained the brain to fear safely. We don't know when the first story was spoken aloud, but we can trace when the brain became capable of telling one. By 300,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens had fully modern brain volumes and shapes. The expanded parietal and temporal regions were ready for abstraction, reasoning, and social thought. Darkness had completed its transformation, from predator to teacher, from threat to muse. Some scientists believe imagination itself began as a side effect of dream synthesis. The same circuits that rehearsed danger in sleep became capable of creating it while awake. That was visualization, foresight, the ability to picture what wasn't there, and so the shadows of night became training partners for thought. But that gift carried a price. To imagine danger where none exists is to invent anxiety. To foresee loss is to grieve before it happens. This emotional depth, though often painful, may have been what made humans truly resilient. Fear no longer needed a visible threat. It only needed memory. That ability to recall what's gone, to summon something that isn't there, marks the line between a frightened animal and a conscious being. Some anthropologists believe that our ancestors' first dreams were full of motion, running, chasing, confusion, echoes of the predator-prey cycle. But as their social bonds grew stronger, their dreamscapes shifted. Faces began to appear. Family, companionship. To dream of others required an inner map of other minds, what psychologists now call theory of mind. That mental breakthrough marked the birth of empathy. In a sense, our social intelligence was born in the same darkness that once held our fears. Even now, research shows that people deprived of sleep begin to unravel emotionally. They grow anxious, paranoid, and hyper-alert to threats. Exactly the symptoms our ancestors had to suppress to survive. The calm, balanced mind that defines our species depends on a nightly descent into darkness. The same mechanism that once kept us safe from predators now protects us from the predators within. Every night, when we close our eyes, that ancient conversation between shadow and thought begins again. We replay danger, test reactions, and soften old memories. The darkness no longer hides lions, but it still carries their echoes. And when we dream of falling or being chased, perhaps it's the memory of that earlier world stirring, when fear first moved from the outside to the inside, keeping those primal circuits alive. What we call imagination isn't an invention, it's an inheritance, the shadow of vigilance refined through sleep, rehearsed through fear, and passed down through every mind that dared to close its eyes while the world was still dangerous. The night taught the brain to think, and we're still its students. The Campfire Brain picture. This. The fire burns low, throwing loops of golden shadow across a circle of faces. It's somewhere in Africa, maybe 250,000 years ago. The air smells like ash and roasted bone. The hunt is over. Beyond the light, the world is silent except for the soft hum of insects. Inside that fragile circle of glow, a small group of humans, our ancestors, sit shoulder to shoulder. They don't speak yet, but something deeper than words is happening. They're learning how to think together. Archaeological evidence from this era shows a major shift in how humans lived with fire. At sites like 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐄𝐒𝐒 Cave in Israel, and in the layers of South Africa's Klipdrift and Border Cave, we find organized hearths, stone-lined, reused, and carefully arranged. These weren't random burn spots. The sediments tell us the fires were controlled, steady flames for cooking and warmth. More tellingly, these hearths appear in clusters, signs of repeated gatherings within shelters. Fire had become more than survival, it had become architecture. Around the fire, the first social geometry took shape. When people began sitting in circles, they weren't just sharing heat, they were sharing attention. Anthropologists call this joint intentionality, when multiple minds align their focus. In the flicker of firelight, everyone saw the same thing, the flames, the faces, the gestures. That synchrony created rhythm, timing, awareness of emotion. From that shared rhythm, storytelling was born. The fire became a mirror, lighting the world, but also reflecting minds back at one another. Studies of modern hunter-gatherers, like the Hadza of Tanzania, give us a glimpse of what those nights may have felt like. During the day, talk centers on food, tools, danger. But after dark, the tone changes. Around the fire, people tell stories, moral tales, jokes, memories. The same quiet individuals who speak little by day become vivid narrators at night. Fire changes the mind. It softens vigilance, stretches time, and opens the doors of imagination. With the fire's protection, early humans could think beyond immediate threats. Instead of watching for eyes in the dark, they could imagine fear, act it out, retell it, turn it into teaching. They mimed hunts, recalled close calls, and shared what they'd learned. These small performances may have been the first form of narrative, the first stories, not dreamed but enacted. At the site of Terre à Martyr in France, dating back about 300,000 years, archaeologists found multiple hearths inside oval huts made of branches and stone. Each fire had its own zone, one for tools, one for food, one perhaps for sleep. This organization reveals not just planning, but consistency. When fire became a permanent feature of home, memory could take root. The same group returned to the same place, and tradition began. The rhythm of light, rest, and return gave birth to the sense of evening itself. Modern studies show that watching flickering flames lowers blood pressure and triggers alpha brain waves, the same relaxed, meditative state associated with calm awareness. That may have been the neurological foundation of cooperation. When fear dropped and empathy rose, the group became one mind. Around the fire, humans practiced shared calm, perhaps for the first time. The circle itself was an emotional technology. The dance of light and shadow also shaped perception. Firelight flickers around 10 times per second, close to the brain's visual rhythm. That flicker syncs with our senses, creating trance-like focus and vivid imagination. The mind fills in what it can't quite see, movement in stillness, faces in embers. Firelight literally made the world come alive. In that illusion, humans discovered visualization, the power to see beyond the visible. By this time, cooking was common. Burned bones and starch traces prove it. Cooked food meant more calories, less chewing, and shorter meals, which meant longer evenings. That extra time wasn't spent sleeping, but connecting. Fire extended the day beyond the sun, giving space for memory, teaching, and imagination to unfold long after dusk. Picture a child watching the adults gesture and hum as they recount a hunt. The flames throw living shadows across the cave wall. The child's brain connects movement, sound, and meaning. This is proto-storytelling, not full language yet, but narrative pattern, cause and effect, tension and release. Once the brain can break experience into parts, it can retell them. Around the fire, memory became performance. Fear and storytelling are twins. To describe danger is to tame it, to turn chaos into sequence. The earliest stories weren't meant to entertain, but to teach survival, how to spot lions, how to track prey, when to stay still. But repeating those lessons in safety transformed them. Fear rehearsed became fear mastered. Through rhythm, mimicry, and laughter, they learned to feel fear together and let it go together. Firelight was therapy before therapy had a name. Traces of pigment and heated stone from this era show early humans experimenting with color. They chose red ochre and bright stone not for function, but pleasure. Under firelight, only high-contrast surfaces stand out. Movement and outline take over. That simplicity may have sparked the first artistic impulses, gestures and shapes born from the desire to make sense of light and shadow. The social space around a fire was small, maybe a few meters wide, just enough for 5 to 15 faces. That number, coincidentally, matches the limit of our brain's ability to hold close social bonds. The light itself defined the scale of intimacy. Conversation, trust, and cooperation all evolved within the warmth of shared glow. It's tempting to imagine language flourishing there, and maybe it did. But what we know for sure is this: fire gave humans a fixed point of focus, long enough for sound and gesture to form patterns. Whether through humming, clicks, or pantomime, meaning began to stretch across time. Fire slowed the world enough for communication to gain structure. Without it, our words might still be scattered noise in the dark. Primates groom each other to bond. Humans, unable to groom an entire group, may have replaced touch with talk. Around the fire, storytelling became social grooming at a distance, binding communities and easing tension. Shared attention became shared identity. And those ancient stories, though long forgotten, almost certainly circled around the same timeless themes: danger, food, kinship, and the vast mysteries of the sky. By 200,000 years ago, hearths appear in growing numbers across the archaeological record, from Mumba in Tanzania to Border Cave. Layer upon layer of blackened stone tells the same story. Generation after generation returning to the same place, lighting the same fires. And in that persistence, tradition was born. Fire was no longer just a momentary tool. It had become an inheritance. Each spark carried the memory of the last, a thread of continuity stretching through generations. In the long twilight of prehistory, the brain and the flame evolved side by side. The more we mastered fire, the more it mastered us, shaping our internal clocks, our metabolism, even our capacity for trust. We became creatures of the evening, defined not by daylight, but by what we did after it. The night stopped being something to fear. It became something to enter. If fear gave rise to storytelling, it was because fear demanded rehearsal. And if storytelling helped us master fear, it did so by transforming it into something we could share. Somewhere between the sparks and the silence, the human mind learned that imagination could protect just as much as strength. When our ancestors gathered at the edge of the firelight, they weren't simply warming their hands, they were warming their minds. They were feeding the same inner flame that would one day ignite myth, memory, and history itself. That circle of light still defines us. Every screen, every stage, every classroom, every glowing hearth, they're all descendants of that first human theatre. What began as survival became reflection. Fire gave us more than heat and food. It gave us rhythm, connection, and the pattern of thought itself. The night beyond the light may have grown safer, but we still gather in the glow, still telling the oldest story we know. That together, in the circle, we can face the dark. The sun has slipped below the horizon of East Africa 200,000 years ago. The air is heavy with change, life itself shifting, adapting, beginning anew. The first Homo sapiens, the ones whose bones will one day be found in places like Omo, Herto, and Florisbad, sit quietly now, not out of fear, but out of listening. The night speaks in layers, the shrill hum of cicadas, the whistle of wind through reeds, the sharp crack of a distant branch. This is the soundscape our species was born into. Before language, before migration, before memory, we learned the world through sound, through darkness. Africa, after sunset, was never silent. Even now, its ecosystems breathe in rhythm through the night. Frogs mark the first hour after dusk. Crickets keep time through midnight, and before dawn, the low growls of predators close the cycle. These patterns are ancient, and early humans would have been exquisitely attuned to them. Modern studies of hunter-gatherers like the 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐄𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐌𝐿 and the San show that after sunset, human hearing sharpens. When sight fades, the ear takes over. The night forces the brain to listen harder. That shift from seeing to hearing may have begun right here, where every sound meant something. Rain approaching, elephants crossing, a snake dragging itself through sand. To imagine what those first humans heard in the dark, we can look to Africa's ancient ecology. Fossil pollen and isotope data reveal that between 200,000 and 150,000 years ago, Africa's climate swung between wet and dry phases, turning plains into a patchwork of forests, grasslands, and lake shores. Each environment carried its own music, the bass-like groans of hippos in the shallows, the high calls of fruit bats weaving through trees, the snorts of antelope mixed with the buzz of insects over stagnant pools. The night wasn't empty. It was alive, a symphony of survival cues. In this world, darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was its own kind of presence. Early human eyes, tuned for both daylight and dusk, could catch the faint shimmer of starlight, far beyond what modern, artificially lit eyes can perceive. Their internal clocks, their circadian rhythms, followed the natural cycles of moon and temperature, perfectly syncing to dawn and dusk. Genetic research shows that this ancient rhythm is deeply embedded in us, inherited from early mammals and fine-tuned in our lineage to match the steady beat of equatorial day and night. Living near the equator meant equal hours of light and darkness, a natural metronome that guided hunger, hormones, and sleep. In that steady pattern, sleep came in 2 acts. A first gentle slumber soon after dusk, followed by a period of quiet wakefulness, and then a second deep sleep near dawn. This rhythm, still observed in communities untouched by electric light, suggests that our ancestors spent those middle hours of the night in a state of soft awareness, listening, thinking, and tending to embers. It was during this time that memory settled, ideas formed, and silent communication, whispers, gestures, glances, evolved. The night was not downtime, it was inward time. Even the moon, quiet and distant, played its part. Its shifting light changed the rhythm of life itself. Bright nights drew animals out to graze, predators adapted their hunts, and humans, in turn, adjusted too. Modern forager studies show that moonlight increases movement, social interaction, and even music making. 200,000 years ago, it would have been instinct. Under a full moon, early humans walked, gathered, and perhaps fished in glowing rivers. During the new moon, they stayed close, relying on touch and sound to feel the world around them. And when the darkness deepened completely, even the smallest glimmers, the faint light of fireflies or glowing fungi, became companions in the void. In tropical forests, the darkness was never complete. The glow of fungi and the soft flicker of fireflies pierced the night. Even termite mounds shimmered faintly with green light, born from the quiet chemistry of decay. To our ancestors, these small illuminations must have felt like nature's lanterns, signs of renewal in the dark. They didn't know the science, but they understood the message. Where there is light, there is life. To see something glow without flame or sun must have felt like watching the secret pulse of the earth itself. Archaeological soil samples from ancient shelters like Mumbo and the Middle Stone Age layers along Clayse's River reveal alternating bands of ash, clay, and organic residue. These layers suggest our ancestors moved with the seasons, returning when the rains came and food was abundant. They lived in rhythm with their surroundings, syncing their internal clocks not just to day and night, but to the heartbeat of the landscape. Scientists call this circadian entrainment, the biological harmony between body and environment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, another sense took over. Smell. Cool night air carries scent farther, turning the invisible into a map. Long before sight could warn them, our ancestors could smell hyenas on the wind or sense nearby water from the faint sweetness of damp soil. Humans evolved a deep sensitivity to 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿𝐿, the earthy smell of rain-soaked ground, and it likely guided their travels through the dark. The first Homo sapiens weren't lost wanderers, they were scent navigators, reading the night through chemical traces only their noses could see. Then came the cold. When darkness fell across Africa, temperatures could drop more than 10 degrees. That shift signaled a change deep inside the body. Melatonin release, metabolism slowing, the quiet call to rest. Evolution wired us to sleep when the air cooled and wake with the rising warmth. Our ancestors lived by the rhythm of the planet's breath. Modern sleeplessness, in some ways, is the echo of breaking that ancient pact. At night, distance became a question of sound. Without horizons to measure space, voices and echoes were the map. A single call could feel both close and far away. Reflections off trees and stone warped reality into something mysterious, a space alive with presence. Anthropologists note that such ambiguity often gives rise to reverence, to the sense that the night itself is speaking. But for early humans, this wasn't about spirituality. It was survival. Listening to echoes helped them understand terrain long before sight could confirm it. Over generations, the human brain expanded its auditory cortex, learning to build a mental map from sound. Our love of rhythm and resonance may have begun here, in the nightly practice of listening to the world's pulse. Between 200,000 and 150,000 years ago, life was a sensory equilibrium. Day belonged to the eye, night to the ear. Smell and temperature ruled the edges of dawn and dusk. Each transition demanded a different awareness, shaping adaptability, humanity's defining strength. To endure shifting African climates, our species didn't need to dominate nature. We needed to pay attention. Picture lying beneath an acacia canopy as fruit bats glide overhead. Far off, thunder rolls, a soft promise of coming rain. The air smells metallic, charged by lightning. You're not thinking, just listening, syncing your breath to the rhythm of insects, your heartbeat to the wind. What we now call silence didn't exist for them. There was always something alive in the dark. Perhaps that's why we still crave rhythm and repetition. The chirping, croaking, and whispering of the night were the original metronome of the human brain. Our ancestors' minds learned to anticipate those natural beats, predicting the next sound before it came, a skill that became the root of rhythm, music, and even language. Long before drums or words, the night itself was already composing. These nightly rehearsals shaped not just culture, but consciousness. Africa after sunset was the cradle of calm attention, where early humans learned to trust the dark instead of fearing it. They weren't trying to conquer their world, they were learning to belong to it. When you step outside tonight and hear the hum of insects or the slow rhythm of waves, you're hearing the same frequencies that once trained our ancestors' senses. The echoes of their world still hum in ours, a reminder that before we ever saw the universe, we listened to it. The night was our first teacher, and its lessons still whisper through the hours after the lights go out. You wake to a leopard's cough in the dark, not a roar, not a growl, but a deep, rhythmic clearing of the throat. The air goes still. You're a human on Africa's southern coast, 200,000 years ago. You know that sound. It means you're being watched. By dawn, the leopard is gone. Only tracks remain, a musky scent, a few hairs caught on a thorn bush. Without knowing why, you gather them. They won't feed or shelter you, but taking a piece of what stalks you feels like protection. In the archaeological record, this quiet behavior begins to appear around this time. At sites like Wonderwerk Cave and 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿𝐄𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐌𝐏𝐒, fragments of animal skins, ochre-stained residues, and cut-marked predator bones, leopards, caracals, even small cats, tell a story. These weren't random scavengers. The cuts are deliberate, careful. Hides were being removed with precision. They weren't trophies, they were tools. The climate was unstable. Cooling and drying cycles demanded creativity. Clothing wasn't about style, it was about survival. Early hide-scraping tools found in these layers, thin flakes of stone worn smooth from use, show how humans learned to process skins for warmth and durability. And yet, the frequency of feline remains stands out. Why were they drawn to the very creatures that once kept them awake at night? To understand, think about texture and meaning. A leopard's coat isn't just beautiful, it's camouflage, a pattern designed to disappear in shifting light. Wearing that skin, even as a sleeping mat or covering, meant taking on a fragment of that invisibility. In psychology, this is called predator mimicry, adopting traits of a threat to lessen fear of it. Our ancestors may have worn cat hides not only for protection, but to claim a quiet sense of belonging among the hunters who once terrified them. At 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿𝐄𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐌𝐏𝐒, microscopic traces show ochre mixed with fat and plant resin. Early chemistry used to treat hides, repel insects, and preserve materials. Ochre also masked human scent, offering safety in predator-rich environments. What looks like early art might have been pure survival, a practical kind of genius. Predator bones from this era are rare, usually found alone near ancient hearths. That pattern suggests opportunistic kills, predators taken when they threatened humans, not hunted in large numbers. But their remains were used well. Claws, teeth, and pelts turned into tools, ornaments, and coverings. Each item a small triumph over danger, a way of holding power in their hands. To touch the fur of what once hunted you was to face mortality directly, to turn fear into understanding. Modern neuroscience suggests that confronting and controlling danger releases dopamine along with adrenaline, a mix that creates a feeling of mastery. Perhaps early humans learned to manage fear by handling predator remains, the first psychological rehearsal of control. At Blombos, archaeologists uncovered abalone shells filled with ochre-rich mixtures, not for decoration, but for use. Ochre and fat make an effective sunscreen and insect repellent, vital in the blinding African sun. Through this chemistry of survival, humans began to engineer their own biology, to shape the body's relationship with the world. Each hide worked, each pigment mixed, was also an act of empathy. To survive, humans had to know the anatomy of other creatures, how muscle met bone, how skin stretched across form. Every cut was a lesson. Over generations, this taught precision, patience, and fine motor skill, the seeds of craftsmanship and art. Choosing predator skins over herbivore hides also made sense. Carnivore pelts are denser, warmer, and more durable, harder to obtain and therefore more prized. Even before symbolic culture, scarcity carried meaning. Those who could take what others feared gained quiet status. Long before hierarchy had words, survival itself created it. Every tool, every trace of ochre, every cut-marked bone from that era tells the same story. Humanity was not just surviving the night, it was learning from it. At some ancient sites, traces of pigment show signs of repeated grinding over months, even years, proof that preparing color was a habit, not a ritual. The pigments they made, mostly shades of red and brown, mirrored the tones of the earth and animal fur, blending the body into the landscape. This may have served as a kind of camouflage during hunts or while resting in open ground. By covering their skin and clothing in the same colors as dust and blood, early humans became less visible, part of the environment itself. The line between hunter and hunted grew thinner. In the layered floors of Blombos Cave, archaeologists have uncovered not only worked hides, but the bones of small predators, pierced in specific places to extract tendons and ligaments. Those fibrous strands made excellent bindings, the sinew that lashed stone blades to wooden shafts. A leopard's strength was literally woven into human technology. Every piece of the predator, claw, tooth, tendon, became useful. The animal that once symbolized danger had been transformed into raw material for survival. We often picture early humans as passive victims of nature, but the evidence tells another story. A species that constantly turned vulnerability into innovation. Skinning a leopard wasn't defiance, it was problem-solving. Every new use meant less dependence on luck and more control over life. Anthropologists call this behavioral modernity, not the birth of art or religion, but the rise of cumulative ingenuity. By 200,000 years ago, humanity's toolkit had expanded beyond stone. Tools were now made from bone, fiber, and hide, materials that were organic, flexible, and even aesthetic. This shift didn't just change technology, it changed the brain. The repeated feel of texture, the precision of scraping and shaping, strengthened the sensory cortex, deepening hand-eye coordination. Every stroke across a hide, every press of pigment, built neural bridges that would one day support tool-making, painting, and writing. Our hands were learning to think through touch. In that sense, the skin of a leopard was humanity's first canvas, the surface on which we learned attention itself. And even today, the association between power and animal pattern endures. From fur coats to camouflage, from luxury brands to claw-marked logos, we're still echoing an ancient decision to take what frightened us and wear it. That instinct was never mystical. It was cognitive strategy. By turning fear into texture, we learned to hold danger rather than run from it. The fossil record can't tell us what emotions passed through those early humans as they worked the hides, but the evidence of care is unmistakable. Skins were scraped, stretched, softened, and preserved. That effort required time, an investment that implies foresight and ownership. To make something last beyond the moment of need is to imagine the future. In transforming predator into protection, the human mind glimpsed continuity, the sense that what we create can outlive the moment. By 120,000 years ago, toolkits across southern Africa included specialized bone and stone scrapers designed specifically for processing hides. This innovation marked a threshold, a shift from relying on nature's shelter to building one's own. The animals that once dictated when and where humans could sleep were now lining their beds and backs. Fear had been folded, stitched, and worn into confidence. We'll never know who first thought to soften a hide with smoke or to mix ochre into fat to preserve it, but we can still see their traces, red dust ground into stone, the impressions of hides pressed into ancient floors, the grooves of tools polished by repetition. They reveal minds that understood transformation, not just of material, but of self.